It is official. Sweden will shortly be joining the NATO. This comes on a day when Greek Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis was in Odessa, Ukraine, when a missile landed too close to both the Prime Minister and the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. One can only speculate what might have happened if a Russian missile killed a NATO member head of state. Here's a report of how things are hotting up in and around Russia.
A Russian missile strike and a near-catastrophic explosion in Odessa, Ukraine. What has chilled the world is that the blast took place during a meeting between Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and Greek Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis.
I believe me and Kyriakos heard it. We saw the strike today. You see who we're dealing with. They don't care where to hit. I know that there were victims today. I don't know all the details yet, but I know that there are dead and wounded.
Greece is a NATO member, which is why the missile strike could trigger Article 5 being invoked. Article 5 says an attack on any member of the NATO is a potential attack on the entire NATO alliance. The already tense situation is being stretched to breaking point by escalating tensions by both sides. Russia is flexing its military muscle. It is announcing troop deployments near the borders of NATO countries. The deployments come in the wake of massive NATO exercises in Sweden and Finland, a clear display of the alliance's support for its northernmost members. Sweden brings the island of Gotland for the NATO. It means a new supply route. NATO members can use it as a transport hub in the defense of Estonia, Latvia and Lithuania that earlier relied on the Suwalki Gap, a narrow strip separating the Baltic countries from Poland. With NATO inching closer to its border, the Russian president isn't taking things lightly.
Why can't Russia do this? Stand up for our own people, and not somewhere 1,000 kilometers from our national borders, but right next to us. Moreover, people turned to us and waited for this help. I don't want to go into details now.
Each action on its own may seem insignificant, but together they create a tinderbox, where a single spark could ignite a much wider conflict. As the world watches in horror, Chief of the Military Academy of the Russian General Staff is warning of a full-blown war in Europe. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
William Courtney is an adjunct senior fellow at Rand Global think tank. He's now joining us live from Washington, D.C. Mr. Courtney, welcome to the show. I want to know your thoughts about these two developments. First, Sweden officially becoming a NATO member a day after one of the NATO member heads of state was nearly killed by a Russian strike in Ukraine.
Those are quite separate incidents. What's important about the Swedish and Finnish entry is that neither had wanted to join NATO until Russia launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine 2 years ago. And then suddenly the mood changed in those countries really quite remarkably. Both countries had cooperated with NATO informally for years, but now they're full-fledged members.
Mr. Courtney, Russia just got within 150 meters of an Article 5, with news of the strike in Odessa almost hitting the Greek Prime Minister. While the strike occurred in Ukraine, which is not a NATO member, social media users noted that it was unclear whether Article 5 could be triggered by a NATO member's presence in a war zone. With that in mind, do you think Russia was trying to make a statement? And if so, what statement was that?
Well, Russia has been pretty often assassinating people that it regards as opponents. So this may not be an Article 5 issue. That's an attack on a country. But this is more like an assassination of a kind that we've seen in a number of situations. Of course, most prominently, Alexei Navalny, most recently. In the case of the Greek prime minister, Greece is a country that's been closer to Russia than some of the other countries in Europe, so it's especially ironic that the Russian leadership would seek to assassinate the Greek prime minister. Of course, the Russians would have wanted to assassinate President Zelensky, but to go after both of them like that is a pretty brazen activity.
Mr. Courtney, finally, let's talk about the ongoing war. Are there any repercussions expected to take place following this strike in Odessa, and especially on Russia?
I think it's important to separate the war itself from this assassination attempt. The one aspect of the assassination attempt that one can foresee is that if it had succeeded, and even maybe not succeeded, but certainly if it had succeeded, the Europeans and the U.S. might have an even stronger consensus to support Ukraine in its defense against Russia's unprovoked aggression.
All right, Mr. Courtney, thank you very much for your insights. I've been talking to William Courtney, who is an adjunct senior fellow at RAND Global Think Tank. Mr. Courtney has been talking to us from Washington, D.C. Mr. Courtney, thank you.
You're welcome.
For all the latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.